New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Our topic today is Attitudinal Healing. With me is Aeeshah Ababio, the volunteer director of the Attitudinal Healing Connection in Oakland, California. Aeeshah is also the assistant program director of a small psychiatric residential treatment center in Oakland. Welcome, Aeeshah.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You know, I feel so moved when I speak to you. Even when I call your office on the phone, I get a message that says there is no problem so great that love cannot heal it. That seems to be the essence of attitudinal healing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Attitudinal healing is some concepts that, if practiced, I think it will change anyone's life. I know they've changed my life over the years. Mm-hmm. They are 12 tenets that focuses on love and how we can start to really get in touch with who we really are. Like, for example, the first principle of attitudinal healing is the essence of our being is love. The essence of our being is love. And I really feel that that first tenet encompasses all 12. Mm-hmm. And the second one is really great because it says giving and receiving are one in truth. Giving and receiving are one. And truth. And true. Mm-hmm. Yes. And attitudinal healing defines health as being inner peace. Mm-hmm. Healing as letting go of fear. Mm-hmm. Attitudinal healing really is based on the belief that it's not people or events or situations in our life that causes us to be upset, but it's our thought, our attitude, our responses. Mm-hmm. The way we react to the events and to the situations mm-hmm. and the people in our lives. I think those are the things that causes us to be upset. And it takes a lot to really take responsibility for how you react and how you feel about things and not want to blame someone else, to really get out of the role of being a victim. Mm-hmm. The opposite of attitudinal healing would be to hang on to your blame. Mm-hmm. You know, those are beautiful sentiments, and I think almost anybody in the audience would agree with them in principle. But then people will say, but, you know, it's a tough world out there. And you, in particular, are dealing with some of the toughest problems that exist. Can we talk about those? You know, one of the things that I really decided to do as I began to work with these concepts, I realized that we all in America, we have this kindergarten mentality in which we focus on shapes, sizes, and colors. So one of the issues that I have been focusing on and working with and have joined with a group of people in Oakland is to impact our racial attitudes and also to impact the institutionalized racism that affect 90% of our youth, mm-hmm. especially in the inner cities. Mm-hmm. The victimizations that occur, the rage that they're experiencing, a lot of the things is that they are responding to a society that really shut them out. Mm-hmm. And so these are the things that we do with the connection. We go and we work with people who are dealing with these kind of issues and working with people. And we also believe that it's important to work with the professionals, because a lot of times we as professionals or teachers, we want to fix the person. The social worker feel like, I got it together, you know, it's my client that I have to really kind of fix. And what attitudinal healing is saying to you is that really is how you are experiencing the people that you work with, that who you really are, flow through your work. You don't never just teach math, mm-hmm. that you teach who you are. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, I was working with a principal, and this particular principal was the president of my daughter's school, mm-hmm. California College of Arts and Crafts. And after the Rodney King riots, he really felt that he wanted to do something. And we were talking, and we really shared those concepts. And so what he decided that he would do was take a group of children to work with these youth and to look at these youth as being successful people. Mm-hmm. So he called together some teachers in Oakland, and he asked the teachers to send them at least 6 of their worst students. Mm-hmm.
The worst students?
Worst students.
What are the worst students?
Well, students who have dropped out, students who don't show up to school, teachers just really can't do, constantly being suspended, mm-hmm. That really F students. Mm-hmm. And so the teachers chose some of these kids, and he sent each child a letter. And in the letter, he said that they were being chosen for this special summer program because of their excellence, because of their expertise, and because of their talent. And he enrolled these kids into this program. He gave them all a camera and a journal, and he had a staff. And one particular person that was very important was a person who taught English as a second language. Mm-hmm. And these were all black kids in the inner city of Oakland. Mm-hmm. And that summer he told them, he said, look, every great person, in order to become great, they make sense out of their own life. And he told them to go home, to begin to take pictures, to begin to write about their own personal experience, about their life. Mm-hmm. And as he shared these ideas with these kids, they began to really change. And at the end of that summer program, they went back to school. Their self-image changed. They began to see that who they were was positive human beings, mm-hmm. that they could accomplish things. They turned their own life around because they began to get in touch with their true self, which is a positive, talented, wonderful human being.
Making sense of the story. And I would imagine, though, that for these young people, there was some tragedy that they had to come to terms with.
A lot of tragedy, because most of them were living without parents, no fathers in the home. Some of the parents are on drugs. Most of the kids had to take care of themselves. They had to make sense of some very horrible situations. Mm-hmm. But it really proved that you can overcome any situation.
Mm-hmm. These are kids who, I suppose, because of their behavior, would normally be getting very different kinds of feedback from the system.
Very different kinds of feedback from the system because of the fact that they get shut out. As soon as you begin to fail in school every year, your record follows you. And so what we want to do in attitudinal healing is begin to work with people to let them see that they don't have to continue to fail. They can turn that around. Mm-hmm. So by sharing these kind of ideas, these are ideas that I believe, if applied, will change anyone's life. Mm-hmm. And I still want to say back to my own personal life.
Yes.
Is that I feel like these are the ideas that I've been working with for some 15 years now.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about the changes that you've gone through yourself in this regard. I know you've told me that mm-hmm. before you began working in the area of attitudinal healing, mm-hmm. you had become so alienated from mainstream white society that you were a member of the Black Muslims.
Well, that was by choice. Mm-hmm. I chose to really join the Nation of Islam because along with, I think, many young people, when you begin to enter this society, especially if you're going into the university. Mm-hmm. I grew up in the South. I was the youngest of 12 children, very loving family. And you would think that growing up in the South that you would be impacted with a lot of issues, but because I grew up in an all-black society, my mother and father worked for themselves. They took very good care of us. I never thought about, white society, or that white society had certain attitudes about blacks mm-hmm. that was very, very negative. Mm-hmm. I would hear stories about lynchings or castrations, but it never touched me because of I was very loved and cared about.
You had a healthy childhood.
I really felt that. It wasn't until I went to UC Berkeley in 1966 that I began to really learn how the wider society saw Black Americans. And I was majoring in sociology. I really wanted to become a social worker and was very interested in that. But as in the sociology classes, the first thing you begin to learn is that Blacks were poor, Blacks were deprived, Blacks was on the fringes of society, and that we really couldn't be helped and there was no hope for Black people. I became angry. After class after class after class, and you look into the historical classes, I just couldn't help it. I remember one very small sociology class I had. The professor, my first day in the class, the professor asked how many wasps were in the classroom. And it was like my freshman year, and I was thinking wasp. At the time, I was thinking a wasp was something that sting you. So I was thinking, what does he mean? So I raised my hand up, and I said, sir, what do you mean wasp? He said, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Of course. And I just felt totally ignorant at that point. And I sunk down in my seat, and the rest of the semester the quarter was just really a struggle because every issue was just really just like very demeaning to me as far as I was concerned. So after 4.5 years of taking these classes and struggling with these issues, I became so angry. I wanted nothing to do with this society. And so I began to hear about a man named Farrakhan. So I went to some of his lectures, and he was talking about the sociological conditions of Black people and the reason why Blacks were treated this way in society and thought of this way in society was because these were the kind of ideas that whites wanted Blacks to believe about themselves, that they were poor, that they were deprived, that they were wretched, they couldn't do for themselves, that they had to be taken care of. And I just realized that this man is making sense.
Because he was preaching self-reliance.
Self-reliance. The thing that I grew up with. I was thinking this really makes sense. Now go into the Black community, and I could see how we began to really believe these kind of ideas. And I was like, this is ridiculous. So I became a Black Muslim because it was the most logical thing at the time for me.
And it seemed like a healing path.
It seemed like a healing path. And, it said the reason why the white man did what he did was because he was a devil. He couldn't help himself. And I said, well, that makes sense. If a person can't help being wicked, then what you do, you just remove yourself and do the best you can to build a society that you can live harmoniously in. And so at the end, after I graduated from UC Berkeley, I became a teacher in the Nation of Islam. And I taught there for about 7 years. And it wasn't until one Sunday I was looking through the paper, and I was also beginning to really look at this, and I was beginning to feel a lot of sadness for our society. Because as the years grew past, you could see the condition of Black Americans and poor people in general really became worse and worse and worse.
And here you were doing all of this good work, but living in a society surrounded by devils.
And also living in a society where people were really, really struggling very hard to really deal with the conditions that they had to deal with.
Yes.
And I said, this is very sad. I really became very sad about this whole process. I said, what can happen? How can we change this whole society around? And it was like, if these people can't be helped, and these people over here in this camp, it was like it was no solution. And
if you accept that another person is a devil, then there is no
solution. Hope. There's no hope. Because they're going to do whatever to destroy other people. I
mean, it's the epitome of blame, I suppose.
It is and it also puts you in a situation of being a victim too. Because you have a perpetrator and then you're the victim.
Yes.
And so one Sunday I was looking through the paper, and I was looking at that there was going to be some workshops over at JFK.
John F. Kennedy University, yes.
And I had not been on John F. Kennedy University's campus or a white campus in 7 years.
Mm-hmm. You had isolated yourself
I had isolated
completely.
myself
Mm-hmm.
completely.
Yes.
And so what happened was I decided to go over there and talk to the professor about going to just one particular section in which Anne Armstrong, a psychic, and why I should seek out a psychic. It was like maybe she could answer some of these questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I scheduled to go to that workshop. When I got to the workshop, Anne Armstrong wasn't there. There was another lady there named Judith Scotch introducing a set of books titled A Course in Miracles.
A Course in Miracles.
And as she talked about these books, I had this experience in which I was in this room filled with whites and feeling very alienated.
Mm-hmm.
But as she read the introduction to these books, which really talked about there being only two emotions, one being love and the other being fear, and that one we made, and one was real. And it was very confusing to me, but it was making...
The principle was that our fears are our own creation, and love is real. If we can let go of the fear, we get to what is real.
So that's what I was listening to this, and I said, my goodness. And I began to really experience this sense of oneness for a moment in the audience. Because I was thinking, oh. And I got up, I said, I think I want to get these books. And as I looked to the back of the audience, it was this guy there selling these books named Jerry Jampolsky. And I looked at him, and he was really smiling. I was like, I wasn't in the mood to smile. Or
You didn't want anyone to smile at you.
I didn't want anyone to smile at me. Yeah. I was feeling very, very
protective of yourself.
Protective and anxious. And I walked to the back of the room, and I said, I would like to get a set of these books. And he said, I think that we're out of them. I said, oh, good. If they were for me, you would have them. And then he said, well, you can come this Thursday at my house, and here's the address. And I left there feeling even more confused. And I did go over there that Thursday in Tiburon, which was very difficult for me, because I think what happens is that we get into our little boxes. I had been in a little box where I lived in the black community. And I had not really ventured into a white community for many years. And
Tiburon is an affluent white suburb.
Affluent white suburb, but I had no intentions of going there.
Yes.
And I was very fearful, so a friend of mine went with me. And that night when we got there, it was the most scariest experience that I could imagine, because Jerry asked everybody in the room to hold hands. And I was thinking, hold hands, and I looked to my left and I looked to my right, and I was thinking, I cannot possibly hold hands of someone white. I just couldn't at that time. And I looked, and finally I just kind of settled down. I closed my eyes real tight, and I reached my hands out, and I held the person's hands and closed my eyes, and I began to really have this experience where I began to see that I was holding on to fear. And something deep inside me said, teach only love. And then that didn't last very long. I left there that night. I grabbed the books, and I left there that night. And I started to read these books. And later on, I became interested in attitudinal healing, which the books reformed are the matrix.
Yes. The Course in Miracles.
Yes, these particular books, the concepts, the attitudinal healing concepts came from these books.
Yes.
And I began to work with these concepts, and I began to see how important it is to look at these concepts and practice them.
I might just mention parenthetically that A Course in Miracles is a series of books that was supposedly channeled through a Columbia University psychology professor who believed that the voice of Jesus Christ was speaking to her.
Yes.
And it's a 3-volume set, and the essence of it, I suppose, might be nicely summarized in what you just said, teach only love.
That is the essence of those books. In fact, the introduction of the books really talk about the very fact that it is a required course, but only the time you take it is voluntary. It talks about free will and really, really looking at and accepting the fact that the only thing that really is real is love.
And when you say it's a required course, but only the time in which you take it is voluntary, that suggests that our very purpose for being here is to learn
how to love.
Yes.
The very purpose. And those are the things that I began to really work with, the concepts of looking at when I was experiencing fear and looking at when I was experiencing love. And making a choice between what it is I wanted to experience and how I wanted to view the world that I live in. And so as I began to work with these concepts, I began to see how important it is to share them with other people. Because I began to look at how I was shifting. Like, for example, me and my daughter had gone to get some Chinese food one afternoon. And during this time, I was really looking at the concepts daily and practicing and looking at situations in my life that may come up and really thinking about how to work these concepts. Because these ideas, they're meaningless unless you begin to live them. So I went into this restaurant and I wanted Chinese food to go. My daughter was like, please, Mom, I gotta have Chinese food. So I walked into the restaurant. I sat down for a minute and I asked one of the waitresses, I'd like to get an order of food to go. And this is in Oakland around 1985. And young lady walked away, and then I sat there and I was waiting for about 5 or 10 minutes. They never came back. And so my daughter, we were sitting there, and so finally we decided to go up to the counter to get an order of food. So I asked the young lady at the counter, I said, I'd like to get an order of food to go. And so she just said, well, one moment, please, and she left. She was gone about another 5 or 10 minutes, and I was standing there, and I was thinking, this is really taking a long time. And so I sat there, and finally I was just standing there, and finally an elderly lady came out, and I said, I'd like to get an order of food to go, ma'am. And she looked at me and she said, we don't serve you people. And I was thinking, a part of me wanted to really get enraged.
You would have been justified, I think, by almost really any conventional enraged. Standard.
And really look at, this is a lawsuit. But another part of me really looked at her, and I felt a lot of sadness for her. Because here she's, I'm thinking, she don't really know me. She's looking at me. She's thinking, here's a black woman. I don't want to serve her, And so I got up very close to her and I held her hand and I said, you really don't have to serve me. I said, but I really think you should think about what you're doing and the choice that you're making. I said, there are all kind of people in the world. And I found myself saying this. There are all kind of people in the world. I said, there are good Chinese people and bad Chinese people. So good black people and bad black people. Good white people and bad white people. And here I was listening to myself saying these words. And there was a time when I would be fighting. And I was aware that I was making a different choice. And I was looking at her and I was talking with her and she was listening. And as I held her hand and shared these ideas with her, and I said, but, I really think you need to think about what you're doing. And so I dropped her hand and I said, thank you. And I started to walk out of the restaurant. And she said, oh, ma'am, I'd like to serve you. And I was thinking to myself, I don't want her to serve me. And I looked at my daughter and my daughter said, well, Mama, I'm really hungry. And I sat there and I was thinking, my God, and I looked at and I was thinking, children sometimes can really help us to join with other people.
Yes.
So I went back and I ended up talking with this particular woman and allowing her to serve me. But it was an opportunity for me to grow. And I think once you began to see that we can make different choices, we can choose to be more loving in our life. We can choose to look past another person's fear.
Yes.
And so I at one time I would have really gotten upset, gotten angry. I would have felt like a victim.
Yes.
and would have also wanted to sue her or something.
And might have won.
And probably would have won.
Yes.
It was an excellent,
Mm-hmm.
But I looked at her and I was thinking, she don't know me. Let me just really take a moment to get to know her and help her get past this. And I think that's what we have to do as human beings. We have to take the moment, take the time to really get past our prejudices and to really talk about these prejudices
Mm-hmm.
and to really be willing to let them go.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, I know I've had opportunities where I had to really make a choice to let my prejudice go.
Yes.
And that's what, I think that's what attitudinal healing does for people.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you a tougher question, if I may, Aeeshah. You mentioned that you had a happy childhood, but you're working now with people in Oakland, California. They haven't had happy childhoods. They're having unhappy childhoods. They're witnessing mayhem and death, shootings on the street on a regular basis. Isn't it harder? I mean, you've been struggling with this yourself for many, many years. What about for young people who are witnessing this kind of chaos all about them?
Today I did a group today at the East Bay Conservation Corps. And these are young people who are at risk. These are young people who have been in jail, been shot, have gone through all kinds of atrocities. All of them are like from ages of 17 to 22. All of them are mothers and fathers of at least one or two children. And as I was listening to their stories and sharing with them the idea of the concept that the essence of your being is love, that they could choose forgiveness.
Yes.
That they can choose to be happy inside, regardless of what's going on outside. I had one young man said, look, ma'am, I really hear what you're saying. And I really, I just want to share with you, what I've gone through in my life.
We've got just a minute. Aeeshah.
He said, what I've gone through in my life is that I was shot. I've been shot several times. The first person I saw shot was I was 5 years old. And I was excited and scared and I called the police. He said, but around the second or third or fourth or fifth or sixth time I saw someone shot. He said, I began to get numbed out. So as we were working with these young people, we were helping them reframe and relook at their experiences so that they could make different choices.
Even in the ghetto. Aeeshah Ababio, you are a loving, beautiful being. Thank you so much for being with me.
Okay.
And thank you for being with us.
Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
You can now download a free PDF copy of issue number 8 of the New Thinking Aloud magazine or order a beautiful printed copy. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.